What's up guys, Hayden here again from Alarm System Store, and today we're going to be doing a, not really a comparison video, but I'm going to be showcasing all of the PowerG door contacts that we carry. This is the entire PowerG door contact lineup actually, but essentially I just wanted to give you guys an idea of what each sensor looks like, the size, so that you guys can try to, mentally fit them in whenever you're deciding what type of contact you want for your home. And I'm just going to be going over the options basically. So I have a Sharpie here and a standard pair of scissors. I don't have much to kind of compare it to size-wise, but I'm hoping this will kind of give you guys an idea of the size of the contacts and where you can place them. But essentially, I'm going to move the camera over here so you guys can see my little setup, and then we'll get talking about them. All right, so the first contact we're going to be going over today is the PG9303. Now, this is easily our most popular model, and that is because this is the slimline door contact, so it's going to fit in the most spaces. Basically, this is just a standard door contact. There's absolutely nothing special about it whatsoever. However, this is the smallest door contact that you can get with PowerG. For those of you that like dimensions, this is a sensor that's 2.6 inches long, 1.2 inches wide, and 0.4 inches in height. So it's pretty small compared to all of the others. The magnet is, I think, about 1.5 inches long, maybe 1/2 inch wide and 1/2 inch in height. Basically, this is going to be the option that most people choose for 90% of applications because, like I said, it is the smallest and it's going to fit in the most areas. Generally with doors, you don't have too much trouble fitting door contacts. However, with windows, there's all sorts of different window styles you could have out there. So depending on what that window style is, it allows for certain contacts to be used. This is one of the easier sensors to enroll actually, because whenever you pull up, whether you're working with a DSC Neo system or a Qualsys, they both have auto learn features. And this little pull tab right here makes it very easy to enroll the sensor. Basically, once you have the auto learn section pulled up, you just pull the tab out. As long as you're not like 2 inches away from the receiver, it will pick it up almost every time. And now occasionally you might have to pop this open and actually actuate the tamper inside. I'll demonstrate that real quick actually. All right, so if you pop this thing open, inside here you'll see a pretty obvious button right there. And that is actually the tamper switch for this device. So if you ever don't get it to enroll the first time, you can come in here and just push on that button a few times and it will actually send you saw the red light flash there? It sends a tamper signal to the panel. You can enroll the sensor to whatever panel you're working with by triggering that tamper. A lot of the other PowerG sensors have an actual enroll button. This one does not, however. So another thing that is kind of unique about this sensor is it uses this disc style battery. Basically, this one is one of the few sensors that use that. Now, real quick before I go to the next one, I wanted to show where the magnet fits against this door contact. So you can see that little protrusion right there. That is actually where the reed switch for this contact is. Hopefully you guys can see that on the camera. But essentially, as long as this magnet, the magnet in here actually covers most of this casing. So as long as the magnet's anywhere around here, it will actually actuate that door contact. You can place it sideways if you need to. You can have them catty corner like that. Basically, as long as the magnet is close to this section of the contact, you'll be good to go. So this one does give a little bit more maneuverability in terms of the way you can place it. But moving on from there, we'll move on to, let's do the recessed sensor next. So this one is the PG9307. This is the only recessed contact in the PowerG lineup. However, being recessed, it is just designed to be mostly hidden. So whenever you have it installed, basically that is all you would see. You would just see the cover, and then if you use these two little screw tabs, then you would see those as well. If you do have a pretty tight hole that's drilled, there are little beveled edges here, so you could actually bend these little tabs off, and that way you wouldn't have to use screws, but it's just an extra mounting option in case the hole is too big, or, you know, whatever the case might be. If it just doesn't fit quite right, you can use those tabs to hold it in place. Essentially, this side just goes into the frame of the door or window. So you're going to need a 3/4 inch hole, and like I said, once it's placed in there, as long as it doesn't move, you can tear those tabs off, or you can just use screws if you're not too worried about it. And then on the window or door itself, you would place this cap. So the cap itself is, again, 3/4 inch, so you can actually recess this by taking this magnet and basically shoving it down into the cap, and then pushing that into the window or the door, and then you would just see basically the front of that cap sticking. I mean, it doesn't stick out very far. You can see the edge is very small, but that is what you would see on the door or window. However, if you do have a door or window with a bit of a gap in it, you can use just the magnet itself. It's got a little sticky tape on here, so you just peel that off. You can stick it directly on the door, and that will give you a little bit more clearance in case the gap is a little bit too wide on your door or window. The nice thing about these is basically just the fact that they are mostly hidden from view, so priority doors where you don't want people to be able to see that you have door and window contacts, you can use these instead. And just so you guys have an idea of how the battery and everything works in this, basically this entire outer piece is just a casing. So if you'll see right there, basically there's an inner portion to this sensor, and you just pop open the sensor using this little cap right here, and then the entire sensor itself actually slides out of here. So as you can see, that's just a case, and this is the actual sensor. So right here is where your battery is going to go. So whenever you get it, pop this out, stick the battery down in there. These edges are kind of angled, so it just kind of fits right down in there, nice and easy. And then right here is your enrollment button. So whenever you go to enroll this, you basically put the battery in, give it a second to power up, and then you hold that little button down for a couple seconds, and then a yellow LED will light up. Release the button and it will connect to the Qualsys or DSC panel that you're using. One thing you do have to be very careful of with this sensor is the tamper switch. So it's kind of hard to see, but right here, that little black plastic arrow looking thing, that is the tamper switch itself. So whenever you slide it back into the casing, it pushes that little tab to the right, it clears the tamper. Now whenever that prong is sticking straight out, there's a little spring that kind of resets its position, but whenever you pull it out, obviously that tab isn't going to have any pressure on it, so it's going to show the tamper condition. Now what you have to be careful of is, because that tab is so small, you can break that off. I've seen a few people do it. Basically you just got to be careful when you're sliding it in and out. The initial insertion of the sensor into the casing isn't that bad, but right about there is where the tab hits the casing, and then you just got to be easy when you push it in. Just don't be too rough with it. All right, so anyway, let's move on to the next sensor. All right, so the next one in the lineup is going to be the PG9945. Now this is actually what would be considered the standard door contact. This is the full size, just regular door contact. Basically, it works exactly the same way that the 9303 does. Right here you got a little arrow. You can see that's where the magnet goes. So as long as your magnet is close to that side, then it will be good to go. The nice thing about these, however, is these actually have a auxiliary input on them. So what that means is once you get this open, there's actually an input for a hardwired sensor. So you can use like additional door contacts. You could connect like a panel tamper sensor, like a cabinet tamper. There's a few different things you could use with it. It doesn't provide a lot of power because the battery in here is a 3-volt, so it can't run anything serious like a water sensor or anything crazy, so don't try anything like that. But essentially, Whenever you have like a double hung window and you're trying to cover both sides of it in case it gets pulled up or down, you can use this sensor along with one hardwired sensor and basically cover both portions of the window. And the reason you would do that is basically just because the hardwired sensors are incredibly cheap. It's like $5 for a regular hardwired door contact. For these, they're $35-$40 depending on where you get them from. But essentially, that cuts your cost way down, and it also gives you more coverage options. Now, the other thing that this auxiliary input is used for is garage door sensors. So there is no wireless garage door sensor that's ever been made. They have tilt sensors, which those were actually kind of removed from most lineups because they weren't super reliable. So the best way to cover a garage door is to use this PG9945 and then use a hardwired garage door contact. We have the 66WG and the MET44, I think is what it is, on our site. And basically those are metal garage door designated door contacts. So they're more industrial, they're sturdier, they're gonna hold up with, the beating and banging of a garage door whenever it's opening and closing. The 66WG is my favorite because it is track mounted. So essentially it mounts to the track of your garage door, and then it's got a metal portion that sticks out, and then you attach a large metal magnet or metal bracing with a magnet on it to the door itself, and that is your garage door contact. Hooked up to this, it basically just makes it wireless. So these are very, very handy for that purpose. Anytime I'm doing a quote for somebody, that's how I set up any garage door contacts that they need, because that is by far the most reliable way to cover a garage door. Now, in addition, these have a very prominent tamper button, and that is this big rubber button right here. Now, one thing to be careful for is anytime you open this sensor for the first time, occasionally, it's not super often, but sometimes these little rubber covers aren't tight on the button. So if you got it like upside down when you're pulling it apart, occasionally these can fall off. It's not very common at all, but I have seen a few cases where somebody's dropped one and they lost this little rubber piece. And unfortunately, the only way to resolve that is either find the little rubber piece or purchase a new sensor. So that's the only thing you got to really worry about with these. They're pretty sturdy otherwise. The only thing you got to worry about is the reed switch, which is right here. It's that little glass tube. It's got the two little metal prongs in it. Just be careful not to hit this on anything on this side of the contact, because if you break that glass, then it releases the gases that are inside, and those gases help to actually make the metal more sensitive to the magnet. So if that glass gets cracked, or if those little prongs that hold it in place get bent, then basically your reed switch is going to be not usable. So other than that, that is the PG9945. It's pretty straightforward. This one is a bit bigger, so I'll grab the 9303 for comparison. It's a little bit longer. It's about the same width. However, the height difference is the major factor here. So as you can see, the 9303 is very small in comparison. Basically everything above this line is just extra size for the 9945. So it is a bit bigger, it's much more noticeable, so just keep that in mind if you do need them. These aren't super great for windows just because they are so big, and you do have to make sure that this magnet gets close to this little arrow right here. So you can't really, set these sideways or do anything funky with them. You basically have to have the magnet right there. So just keep that in mind, and let's move on to the next one. And the next one we have is the PG9309. And now, as you'll notice, this looks exactly like the PG9945. In fact, this is the exact same sensor except for one difference. This actually has a double auxiliary input. So once I get it open, basically it has two inputs for wires and then a single ground for both. So instead of getting two terminals like you did on the 9945, you're going to get three terminals. So you can hook up essentially two additional door contacts to this. I would not use these for anything other than door contacts. Now, one thing to keep in mind with this contact is if you're trying to use both of these auxiliary contacts, because these batteries are only 3 volt, they can't provide power along a long wire run. So if you're using two door contacts with it, make sure that the wire runs aren't very long. Otherwise, it might not be able to provide that small amount of current that the hardwired sensor needs to be able to read it. So for the most part, they do work pretty well. You just can't do like super long wire runs, and otherwise it is exactly like the 9945. Read switch is over here on the side, same rubber button for the tamper. The only difference outside of that is that for some reason these come with the batteries already installed, and then they just got this little pull tab that you pull out. So it makes it a little bit quicker to enroll, but I mean, that doesn't make much difference in the grand scheme of things. So those are a perfectly fine option. They are a little bit more expensive than the 9945, I think, but if you need that secondary auxiliary input, then this option will provide that to you. So that's pretty much it for this one. Like I said, it's just a 9945 with two auxiliary inputs. All right, so we are down to the last two door contacts that we're going to cover, and the next model is the PG9312. This is the outdoor door contact for PowerG. And as you can see, it is quite bulky. So this sensor is watertight as well as a bit temperature proof. You know, obviously if it gets too cold, there isn't anything you can do, but for the most part, standard temperatures, you're going to be able to use this pretty much anywhere outdoors if you need to. Now, the sensor in particular has a lot of pieces to it. So right there is a cover that basically covers your battery compartment. This screw holds on a mounting plate that's on the back. So I'll disassemble the whole thing in a second. But just remember, whenever you get one of these, there are quite a few pieces to it, so keep track of everything. This cover covers that up. And then, like I said, you have your battery compartment here. And inside here is also where your tamper switch, along with the auxiliary input that this sensor has as well. So as you can see, the battery door has a O-ring around it, or a rubber seal basically, and that keeps the water out. Inside here, that spring right there is your tamper switch. So whenever that cover comes off, that tamper is going to trigger. Right here is your auxiliary input. So again, like the PG9945, you can run a wire from this to another sensor. However, you need to keep in mind, if you do that, that other sensor also has to be watertight and temperature proof depending on where you put it. So this sensor itself will keep this side of the wire good to go. However, wherever you run that wire to, whatever sensor you're connecting, you do have to make sure that it is not exposed to the elements. So you might be wondering how you run the wire for this one. The other ones were kind of just on the edge. Basically, after you attach the auxiliary wire here, there is it's hard to see, but basically you shove it down underneath the sensor, and back here, this back plate, here, I'll go ahead and take it off real quick. This back plate, this is actually a mounting plate for the contact itself, so you can put that where you need it prior to actually installing this. However, for the wire, as you can see, there's a little groove right here, and you can run the wire down through there. Now, on the back plate as well is another groove, so when you match that up, it gives you enough space to run the wire down through the back of the contact and out to wherever you need it to go. Now, on the back here is another tamper switch that you need to be aware of, and that is this button right here. So if this is pulled off and it happens to, like, let's say this is still mounted and somebody rips this off, that will prompt a tamper condition, which if your system's armed, it will set off an alarm. However, otherwise it'll just give you a tamper condition. But just know that this one does have two tampers on it. So if you're installing it and for whatever reason you get a tamper, just know it's not just the battery compartment tamper. There is also the one on the back that you have to be aware of. Now this one can be a little bit trickier because it's got that little rubber piece there, and you know, if that happens to fall out or whatever the case is, it's not going to make contact whenever you put it on the back plate. So keep that in mind. Whenever you're installing these, make sure that you have all the parts and pieces and nothing falls out. This one is not a button per se. It does have a little rubber button thing right there. However, this is one of those contact pad type tampers. So this basically just pushes the rubber until it makes contact with the back of that circuit board. And there's a little circuit on there that shows whether it's tampered or not. And now, right here is the hole for your wire. I'm not sure exactly how that comes out. I've never actually taken one out. I believe, oh, yep, it just pops out like that. So underneath the battery, you shove the wire down in, and then you route the battery whichever way it needs to go. So let me go ahead and put this back together, and that is the PG9312. There's nothing particularly special about this one, other than the fact that it is an outdoor contact. So it's heavy, it's bulky, it's sturdy. Basically, you want to use this any place outdoors, or a lot of people will also use these in places where it's susceptible to receiving any type of damage. So these are good for commercial applications as well. If you have, you know, a garage door that's opened and closed 30 times a day, and people are just kind of throwing it open, slamming it around, it is good to have one of these really durable sensors on there because it will stay reliable, whereas, you know, some of the other door contacts might not be sturdy enough to handle that. One other thing I did want to point out is on the magnet side. So this actually has a little mounting plate for it as well, but in the magnet compartment is actually a fairly small magnet compared to the rest of the casing. So whenever you're placing this, you do want to try and remember that whenever you're placing it, you have to match up the magnet inside here with this side of the contact. So this one has two little protrusions right there. That's telling you where the reed switch is, just like this has two little protrusions showing where the magnet's at. You just got to make sure that those are fairly close. And the magnet in here is pretty strong. It actually pulls it to the contact, so it should be pretty obvious whenever you go to, you know, install it, which side the magnet's on if you're not sure. But essentially, make sure that's matched up and you'll be good to go. So we will move on to the next one. All right, so the last contact we're going to be going over is the PG9935 shock sensor. And as I mentioned, this is a dual sensor, so it does act as both a shock sensor as well as a door and window contact. Now, if you're unfamiliar with what a shock sensor is, it is a vibration sensor. It is another type of glass break detection sensor. So normal glass breaks are auditory. So you put them up on a wall and they listen within a range for the sound frequencies of glass breaking. So they're really good for covering multiple windows. However, if you need like glass protection on your door, or if you have a window that's kind of off by itself and it can't be covered by an auditory glass break, you can use a shock sensor instead. And that way it detects the vibration of somebody trying to break the glass, as well as if they break it, obviously that should be enough to set this off. But because it acts as both a shock sensor and a door and window contact, you have quite a bit of versatility with this. So as you can see, it's got a magnet, so there is a reed switch inside here. However, it also has the auxiliary input as well. So you can use these for double hung windows and actually cover two windows with one shock sensor. So essentially, you have the shock sensor acting as the glass break for the window. You have this reed switch acting as, let's say the upper portion of your window. And then you can also attach a wired contact and have that act as the bottom door window contact. So it is very versatile. It's very useful for, like I said, standalone windows that don't really have any mates nearby. One thing that's cool about this sensor is it has a little digital readout for the shock value here. So whenever you're testing this, basically when you put it up, it has adjustable levels of shock sensitivity. So depending on how hard you hit a window, it's got a little test you do where you smack the window or beat on it a little bit, and it'll show up with the shock value here. So you can set the shock so that if you put it on your front door and you got a, heavy-fisted friend and comes over and starts beating your door down, just knocking, then you don't want your shock sensor to go off. However, for windows, you do want it fairly low in case somebody happens to hit the window or, say a golf ball hits it and breaks the glass or whatever, So it basically just gives you a lot of options in terms of how you set that shock sensor value so that you can kind of customize how it works. So that's one neat thing about it. This one does have another of the spring-style tampers here, so just be careful whenever you're installing this and playing with it. Make sure you don't knock that spring off. They're pretty hard to take off, however, I've seen it happen, of course, so just be careful you don't knock that spring off, because if it's missing, then the cover's not going to push the tamper button down. And that's pretty much all there is to it. It's pretty straightforward. This does come with only the shock sensor active at first. You do have to go into the settings of whatever panel you attach this to and actually turn on the door and window turn on the reed switch as well as the auxiliary input. So it's a little bit more programming work. However, you get basically 3 sensors in one, so it's definitely worth it. And that is basically going to do it for all of the door and window contacts for the PowerG lineup. So if you guys have any questions, by all means, leave them down below. Otherwise, hopefully that was informative and helped you guys make a decision about what kind of door and window contact you guys want. Here at Alarm System Store, we have the entire PowerG lineup. So if you guys are interested, head on over to our website. I'll link it down below as well as the products. You guys can check them out. Otherwise, I will catch you guys on the next one.